Welcome to another video here at Lightingbot. For those who don't know, Lightingbot is a community for, well, everyone really, but people who want to specialize as a lighting artist. Unfortunately, my main intro video doesn't work, so we're going to keep it short today. But we got Scott visiting us today. I believe he is working at Secret Door at the moment, so it sounds very secretive, so let's find out what he's up to there as well. Maybe we can get some info of what's going on or not, we'll see. But we're going to talk about lighting, obviously. His work has been in movies, TV show, and games, so that's a lot of knowledge from him. So let's ask some good questions, as usual. Leave your comments, leave your likes, leave your shares early as possible so more people can tune in as we're talking live. So let's please welcome Scott into the chat.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you, Amit. Appreciate it.
No problem. So, Scott, what we like to do is we like to know a bit about your journey, because you do obviously have quite an extensive experience going back quite a few years. So what I like to talk about is like where you started at school, what happened on the way, because you have been a 3D generalist before a lighting artist, and then you kind of switching around a little bit, I believe, based on your background research I did, even though on your LinkedIn it says mostly lighting artist, but I believe you've been around other stuff and other roles as well. So let's talk about that, where you started and how you went into this focus, which is the lighting part.
Yeah, definitely. So I went to university in Florida. I went to University of Central Florida and got a degree in digital media, which was really cool. The program I was in was rad because we kind of got to touch all elements of CG. So I was able to do modeling, texturing, rigging, animation, the whole gamut. But I really fell in love with lighting during like our senior kind of capstone project. The capstone project, which is like a fun short story. We all got to kind of pitch an idea, and then the whole class got to vote on whose was going to be made, and we kind of divided it into two teams, and then people kind of fell into specialties naturally. And me and two of my buddies just got really deep into lighting and compositing. Like we loved lighting, like that was like our favorite part. So we just kind of dug in as much as we could, watched like Gnomon tutorials, just whatever we could dig into, just to learn, because there wasn't a lot of knowledge like at our school with that stuff. So we're kind of like self-taught and just like trial and error experimenting with stuff. But it was super fun. So that was kind of my first intro to that, was just doing school stuff. UCF also has a graduate program called FIA. And FIA is like their interactive entertainment like kind of section, and it's all video game stuff. So I kind of got to do the animation side of things and then switch over into games, just like even through school. So I got my master's doing the FIA program, which is amazing. It's a similar situation where we had students all kind of pitch games, and then we'd divide into teams and we'd work on those games. But it was sick because the first year we're just doing rapid prototypes. We're doing like 2-3 week games, just as much as we can, just to kind of get used to not getting too precious with them and like trying things and making mistakes and getting better and all that kind of stuff. And then our final thesis project was like a video game, which was really cool. And I got to do the lighting for that, which is great. So I got to get some real-time experience. After that, I just started networking like crazy. Like I was really trying to break in somehow. Like I didn't really know any other lighters. We did have an amazing lighting artist who's, I think he's now head of like all of lighting at EA Tiburon, which is in Orlando. They work on all like the Madden games and FIFA, or no, they didn't work on FIFA. That's in Vancouver. But yeah, they work on like a bunch of sports games. It's pretty much EA Sports. And he came in and kind of gave me some advice. He looked at my reel, stuff like that. And I knew I kind of like needed to keep touching up my portfolio. So while I was in school, I got a job doing simulation work. So I was kind of like modeling and texturing things for helicopters, airplanes, stuff like that. And then kind of got to touch real-time stuff there as well. And after I graduated, I was just really trying to reach out to whoever I could. And I reached out to Joe, who was the guy who came and talked to us. And he eventually was able to get me an associate lighting position at EA. So like, that was my first kind of big job, was working at EA. So that was great. It was like a 7 or 8 month contract. I met a lot of really good people. it was a really cool time for me to start too. It was right when the PS4 and the Xbox One were about to launch. So
Right.
like we had to make the game twice essentially. Like I had to do all the lighting the old school way with like vertex lighting essentially for the Xbox 360 and the PS3. And then we relit the whole game with like a deferred renderer that they were developing like that year. So like they brought me on at a really cool time. I got to learn a ton from the team there. So yeah, that was super cool. But again, like that was just a contract. So there's not a lot of lighting work in Orlando, Florida. So I was like, oh crap, man, I need to figure out what I want to do. Um, Previously, while I was in school for my undergrad, I did do an internship in Venice, California. So it's like in LA area, which was awesome, and I loved it. So I was like, I just want to go back to California. Like, so I just did. I moved out to California and started applying everywhere. At that point, I had like an okay reel. It was still kind of cringy now that I look back at it, but it was enough to get me a job at a visual effects studio.
Right.
So I switched over from games into VFX. I started working at a company called Zoic. They specialize mostly in commercials and television, so it's like very fast turnaround work.
So is this the Zoic during 2013 or 2014? It's the beginning of
This was
2013.
in 2013, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, so it was wild, man. Like I moved out there. I already had the two buddies. They call us the three amigos because we were just always the guys who are the three lighting guys, and we're always together. We'd always get lunch together.
Nice.
One of my buddies, one of the three amigos, he already moved out to California, and he like let me crash on his couch while I was trying to find a job. So that was super nice. Thank you, Eric. That was really cool. So him and his wife, they like, yeah, you can just stay here until you find something, dude. At that time, I had a wife as well and a son who is, I think, like 8 or 9 months old at that time. So I was like, I need to get a job so I can move them out here ASAP. So luckily, I got a job in like a couple weeks of being there, and we moved out, got our own place and everything out in LA. But yeah, the work at Zoic was really, really cool. I met a lot of awesome people, and yeah, it was great. It was different though, for sure. Like at EA, things, especially working on like Madden, things are a lot more structured as far as timelines, and like it's like a well-oiled machine at this point because they make Madden every year.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. So the work was a lot more straightforward. But working at Zoic, they do a lot of television shows like Once Upon a Time, where it's like fantasy creatures and like The Flash and Arrow, like those kind of shows. So there's a lot of creature heavy work, which is really cool. But the turnaround times were nuts. So I was working on Once Upon a Time, and the cycle for VFX was like 2 weeks or something per episode, or like 3 weeks. Like you're like really just banging out renders as fast as you can. So it was just very, very busy work, very long hours. I worked like a couple 23-hour days while I was there just trying to get stuff out because
I think it's a common thing, isn't it? I've heard it a few times now. People working in the VFX movie type of industry, it seems to be surprisingly longer hours than I would expect compared to what we hear about in the game industry. It's like, oh, it's so much crunch and everything. But from all the interviews and the back end conversation I've had with people, it seems to be the opposite. That actually it is much worse in VFX. It's tighter deadlines. You have to work long hours and not even as good pay. Actually, I understand as well, generally speaking, but it depends on the studio. I understand as well. So that's an interesting contrast, I think, because I think a lot of people assume game industry is more tighter crunch over time, but it's
right.
getting less, I would say, in the game industry, from my observation anyway.
It's a different beast. Like I loved working in VFX because the energy, the talent, like the people who are there are just the best of the best. They're so good. But yeah, like at the end of the day, most VFX companies, they are just vendors, and they're all competing for who's going to get a bid for a show or a movie. So they're trying to do whatever they can. They're trying to do it for the cheapest they possibly can. And luckily in LA and when I worked in Vancouver, we had pretty good like overtime and stuff like that. So at least you're being compensated. But like artists in the UK and stuff, they just don't have overtime at most of those studios, so they're just like working for free an extra 4 or 5 hours. But you're totally right. Like when I transitioned back over from film into games, and people were like, "Oh man, we're crunching this week," and they're like, "We're doing tens." It's like, so you're doing a 10-hour day? That's crunching, dude. That's like
It's
normal.
baby stuff for you.
Yeah, so I loved it. I came back. I was like, "This is great. I'm seeing my family way more often now."
That's very good. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously have a very long experience. We'll continue with the track record because you also eventually joined Turtle Studios. I believe it is Evolve, which is a game I personally like to play as well.
Awesome.
I would have preferred Evolve 2 as well, but I don't know if they're going to make it. NPC, Digital Domain, back to Turtleworks, or was it the same time? I think you went back to Turtleworks. And now
Yeah.
you are at Secret Door, correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, I kind of bounced back and forth quite a
They
bit.
must really like Turtle Rocks though, and Zoe, because that's the two places you bump back and forth. I see.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very good. Would you say, because you bump back and forth, would you say it's a good idea to uh, have a very healthy, positive relationship with even short-term contracts, like 3-4 months, which I believe you had? Because I know a lot of people, they go in, they just want to make some money, and then they kind of move forward. But what's your experience with kind of, even if it's the way you phrased it and other people phrased it, I eventually got a bigger gig, but the smaller studios as well, I think counts a lot for potential job and income for a lot of people. Would you say it's a good idea to take it equally serious, and even if it's a 2-month contract, 3-month contract, is it worth moving? Is it worth using it, going that way? Is it easier now, obviously, because we have remote, so we probably should do it? I don't know. What are your thoughts around very short contracts? Because personally, I wouldn't do it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just for people who don't know, like visual effects, especially in LA, it's mostly fast-paced, quick contracts. It's really rare to get any kind of staff position. So if you do want to work VFX in LA, it's be used to like jumping from place to place, and like those relationships are incredibly important. It's really weird actually. Like my sense of time is very skewed because a lot of these studios I was only at for like 4 or 5 months, but it felt like I was there for much longer because of the friendships I built, and like a lot of the people that worked there, I still keep in touch with. Like I got lunch with one of my buddies that I worked with at Zoic like last week, so like we still stay in touch, which is really cool. It's definitely important, especially with these short jobs, and if you're trying to get different contracts, to do your best as possible. That way they will call you back and like, hey, like you were great last time, we have another show, like would you be interested in coming back? So for sure that's important. Another thing is when you're in the trenches and like you're doing these crazy 23-hour days, you're there with other people who are also doing it, and being able to get through that together, like you start bonding in a way where if you're the guy who's not messing things up, you're the guy who's like helping and be reliable, and someone who can take a load off someone else. They remember that. And in fact, when I was working at Zoic, I was kind of freaking out because like, dude, I just moved to LA and my contract ends soon. Like I need to find another job. Like I don't have any connections here. And my buddy Brian that I worked with, he was like, hey Scott, I have a friend who's going on a visual effects like shoot. They're doing a shoot for like a James Franco commercial. Would you go and like shoot on-set photography and like capture HDRs and all this stuff? And I was like, dude, I've never done that. He's like, I'll train you up on it. It's fine. Like you're going to do great. Just do it. And then maybe you can work VFX with them after that. And that was at Frame Store. So I was like, all right, man. So my buddy that I worked long hours with ended up helping me out because, we helped each other out at work, and we were there for each other in like crazy times. So yeah, it was really cool. I got to go to Frame Store and like be on set and like capture photography, shoot the actors, shoot the lighting of the space. And I made good contacts there. That was like a 2-week thing. But because of the time I spent during that 2 weeks with the visual effects supervisor, he's like, hey, Scott, like, do you want to come work on the commercial? Like, do the VFX for it as well? And I was like, yeah, dude, like that'd be awesome. So
in this context, because you're saying it indirectly, but let's investigate. Because would you say the personal relationship and friendship, the ability to build it and maintain it, has been important? And would you say that's a valuable way of getting more work, according to your experience anyway, would you say that's a very important way of just keep going and learning more and getting opportunities versus someone who maybe doesn't do it as much?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to get out of your comfort zone and try to be friendly with people and try to be helpful as in best you can. Like maybe you don't hang out outside of work necessarily. If you want to, that's cool too. Like I happen to find a group that I was like, I want to go get lunch with these people. I want to go hang out after work, whatever it is. But I think it's just important to be someone that people can rely on at work. So whatever you can do and communicate with other departments and stuff like that too, right? Like a lot of times people will get in their little box and they won't talk to anybody else. They're just, these are my tasks, I'm doing my tasks, and that's it. But what I like to do, and that I found helped me a lot, was reaching out to other departments that came before me and after me. So like before me, that's animators, cloth, VFX, like all these things that come into that land on my lap. Then I end up doing the lighting for all of it, characters, whatever. So I'd reach out to them and ask them how they're doing, if there's anything I could do to help them out. And they would always be, because I initiated that like kind of communication, they'd always hit me up. Hey Scott, this is coming in like 2 hours, dude. Like, be ready for it. It's like, all right, great. So I'm prepping myself because I know that I'm going to ingest like these things I've been waiting for. And same with compositing that would come after lighting. I'm handing them off all their passes. And I just write them like, hey, dude, like, is there anything I could do to help you out? Like, I have this other pass I can throw you. I know it's not in the pipeline, but maybe this would help you with this. Oh, dude, that's awesome. Great. Yes, please send me that. So those kind of things are really, really good. And it's good for everybody, right? It makes it so your life is less stressful. It makes it so people aren't pointing fingers and being mad at other departments. Like, oh God, cloth is always screwing stuff up. Like, because that happens and it gets really toxic really fast. But if you just change that attitude and it's like, hey, the cloth guy is my buddy and he's going to hook me up. If there's something wrong, I'll just like let him know. And it's like not a problem,
So in this context, or earlier in the conversation, you mentioned, because you have a lot of experience in VFX as well. I have a young friend. He's quite talented. He's looking for work, and of course he went the Maya, Redshift Arnold kind of way, and that's, I would say, is more animation, but probably easier for him to get into VFX too, I guess. How would you advise such a person to approach or get jobs or opportunity to work? Would you say send directly to MPC, Frames, or that kind of businesses, or what's your experience with that? Or would you say find the people and just spend time with them? Like, there's different strategies. Like for me, spending time with people is a bit harder, so I would go the other way. But just certain, and I think for him too probably. But yeah, let's hear your take on that. What's your go-to trick for that?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of awesome
bribery. Does that work? No.
Yeah, bribery for sure. Like, yeah, bring some donuts, bring whatever you can to get on someone's good side. No, like a lot of companies, they have opportunities for people for entry level stuff, and you kind of have to go through a little bit of stuff sometimes. Like for example, when I worked at MPC, we actually had like a lighting academy. So it was like meant for people who are recent grads. If they have a good demo reel and like they seemed like they're pretty competent in lighting, we bring them into this lighting academy and we'd actually have people who were trainers and they would train these people up. And like they would be able to use assets from real films to like practice with. And then like once they were elevated to a certain level, we'd give them, some of the easier shots or things that weren't as complicated. And we just essentially have like senior artists like mentor them and like sit next to them and help them out. So that's a really cool thing. There's also just like other positions that have nothing to do with the VFX work, but it's a way to get into the studio, like being a runner or something like that. And
I tried once applying for that. It didn't go well, obviously. But
oh no! Did you drop someone's coffee or something?
No, I didn't get that far. But I thought it's probably easy to apply and apply and no reply. It was actually a frame store. But I was thinking the same thing. That if you're willing to do it, obviously you have to have a certain mindset. I think, because I think some people probably are like, I don't want to do this. It's not really what I want to do. They don't want to take the teacher basically. But I think that's all good advice is as well.
Yeah, and being willing to do work that's not what your first choice would be, right? Like I told you, like I was working at a military simulation company for a little bit. It's like
But you're
That's
dedicated, you know, you're an exception, I think. You know, not everybody's gonna do that, right?
right.
You're
Well,
a beast.
I think a lot of people have a certain idea of like even people I graduated with. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I applied to Pixar today and DreamWorks." Like, I don't know, like I don't know which one I would choose though. Like if I get one, it's like, dude, you're not
Because
gonna
I
get hired at
know.
either of those right now. Like you really have to be like insanely good and
Yeah,
probably have like a little bit of experience. So yeah, like I think having expectations that are more realistic, people should still strive for that. I think people should do projects that help reinforce that they could do something in that genre. So like if you
mm,
want to work at Pixar, all your lighting work should look like Pixar movies. Like you should try to
exactly.
emulate like the way that they light, like how much
Yeah.
bounce they have, like all that kind of stuff. If you want to work at Naughty Dog, it should look heavy like The Last of Us, like you should really do your homework and try to gear your portfolio for that. So that's another thing too.
I started with modding actually, and then I did it for free for some companies, like indie companies. They were like just doing stuff, and I thought, yeah, I just do it for free and get some experience. And two of the game actually got released, so that was good for me as well.
Yeah, that's awesome,
So,
dude.
so that I think the shitty lighting though, but the experience was obviously golden and good stuff. So I just want to acknowledge it for a couple of people. Turkey is a loyal viewer, so thank you for watching. We have. I guess it's Mrs. Library or Mr. Library in French. I'm not gonna pronounce it, but thanks for watching. Arthur says hi, Scott. Arthur Yang, you
Yo.
probably know. Um, before we continue with some of the questions that's probably going to start popping up, I just want to show the show reel of Scott so people can get more context because we're talking and there's no visuals. So I'm going to just pull it up because I think it's still ready to pull up. So let's watch it and hopefully think of some questions, people. And while you're watching, before I actually click it, there's like 17 of you. So like, subscribe, at the very least. We always appreciate some kind of support. That doesn't take you a lot of time. So let's have a watch at this quite amazing reel that I think should give you some good questions.
you're muted.
Yeah, I have to mute in the background. So yeah, it's an impressive reel, obviously, and it's funny because when you watch it, you go, "I've seen that, I watched that. So this is all Scott's work." It's kind of funny, isn't it? It's like, oh wow. So that's
That's
kind of
awesome.
funny. Yeah, it's a bit odd because while you were busy doing all this, I was busy teaching game students mostly, and we're doing freelancing. So most of the people I'm interviewing, they like started at the same time I started teaching full time, and I did my stuff on the side, like for outsourcing companies and stuff like that. So it's quite cool to see that. We have a lot to learn here, obviously. So let's build upon this by having one of the questions that are relevant, which is, are there any major differences between writing for games, movies, and TV? Which is essentially our main topic anyway. So let's start talking about it. If you want to put up your art station, if you want me to do it and kind of have some references, we can do that, and you can kind of, I think he has to do a breakdown of some sort.
Sure.
And we can kind of explore the differences and kind of dig deep on your work and your experience related to this. So let's start with, what do you want to start with? TV, movie, games? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll start TV, I guess.
All right.
So this is one of the TV shows I worked on, the Once Upon a Time show. TV and film, obviously, there's a lot of similarities, especially when there's mostly like live action footage. So a lot of this show was integrating CG characters into like a live action plate. So that's kind of what a lot of your work is as a lighting artist. You dig into like what the environment lighting is, how other characters are being lit in the scenes. Like this guy's getting a little bit of dapple from like the light coming through the trees. So trying to integrate some of that on the coat here and like have the ambience and the colors look somewhat correct. So a lot of what you're doing is just matching what lighting's already there and then adding in some like embellishments to make things look better. So like here he's got like a little rim light that's like popping some of his hair off the background and like also giving some more subsurface on his ears, things like that. This isn't the best show or the best example of like quality or anything.
No, I mean, it's still like 5 years ago or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a long time. Actually, this was from 2013, so a little bit longer than that. But
yeah, you just happened to upload it 5 years ago, I guess.
yeah, exactly. But
That's
yeah, I mean,
cool.
like this whole show, like these episodes, we would do like pretty much one episode every 2 weeks or something like that. So like for this environment, for example, we had like a light rig that was set up that would just come packaged. So you're essentially bringing in shots that had camera layouts, and then the actors would come in as well, and then you're just lighting to those plates. But in this case, like the whole background is CG. The only thing that's not CG is this little thing in the foreground, and you kind of tell like the edging there, the comping isn't quite perfect on this one. But like everything else in the shot's CG. So like sometimes you're doing stuff like this where it's matching a CG element and everything else is practically shot. Other times you're doing mostly CG and then like some practical. So like it's just a balance of those things. You're just trying to make it look believable.
So you mentioned the subsurface thing. So in this context, did you manipulate the materials yourself, basically? That's something you're interested with, basically, when you do the lighting?
Yeah, because like everything is about the shot, like you're lighting shot to shot, and you do want continuity and stuff like that. But there is room to do some look development changes like per shot, right? Like in this case, totally. Like we're able to boost up the subsurface on those areas. We have masks for all that stuff. Some of the things we kick out as passes to compositing, so that the VFX supervisor, like on the fly, can give them notes to change things, and like then we can call the shot final. Things get finaled a lot faster. So, there is like a quality dip between feature film and TV. Feature film, you get way more time to work on stuff and get it right. For TV, it's like, oh, it's good enough, right? Moving on, let's go. Because just the schedules are way
So
crazier.
would you say that TV is, correct me if I'm wrong, understand me correctly when I say easier to get into as a junior, as a newcomer? Would you say it's easier to aim towards TV type of work versus feature film or film, movies, and games? Or what's your thought?
I would say so. Yeah, I think the bar is a little bit lower. I mean, to be fair, there are shows now where like the VFX are on par with feature film. Like if you watch Game of Thrones or something, it's like, dude, this is like 10 movies in one season. This is crazy, right? Like, so like the shows that like are on CW and stuff like that. Like those ones, the quality is still really good and it's nice, but like it's not as good as something like that's going to be on HBO or something like that. So like those kind of houses, I think, are a little bit easier to get into.
Especially maybe cartoons, animations. I think they tend to be more forgiving, I would say. Would you agree or disagree on that?
I think so. It's just a different kind of craft, right? I would say lighting for animation is a lot more similar to lighting for video games, actually, because you're creating like a whole world and like you're responsible for the lighting of everything. You're kind of like the director of photography for your scene, right? Where in feature film, it's like the lighting's already been figured out by the real DP, and you're just matching it. So it's just a different like kind of muscle to flex. They're both really hard in their own right, and they're both really cool in their own right. But yeah, like for feature film stuff, like for certain shots, we would manipulate things for Thanos, for example, like on the fly. There's just differences between sequences. Like in this whole sequence, we had to do a different look dev for his tunic and stuff because he's more dirty at this state because of the past sequence. Funny things too, like because this film is like so high profile and like Marvel is just huge. In the trailer we released, we had to do different renders without the Infinity Stones because fans weren't supposed to know that he has the stones. So like people were catching all those like in the trailer. But yeah, you have things like this too, where like this is full CG. A lot of the trees are CG replacements as well. And then we have a live action actor. And the real situation in this shot was Josh Brolin had a hockey glove on and he was like just like holding it over Chris Evans. And like that's what was there. But there's like a ton of work that excuse me, had to be done. Like we had to move Cap's arm because the placement wasn't correct based on the hockey glove size versus Thanos's real gauntlet, right? You have to do cool things like match moving. So like even though Chris Evans is real, you'd have an artist go in who's like a match moving artist and animate a fake Chris Evans to make it so his hand is in the correct place and all that stuff so that you get the occlusion, the shadowing, and the reflections properly like on the CG that's interacting with. So we'd have to do like a pass where it's just like the reflections from the match moved character. And like you could take this plate and project that onto the match move so that the colors match and like all that stuff. So
just to have some connecting questions as well, would you say it's because when you explain it, all the things that goes into just a shot in a feature film, would you say it's more difficult to do this kind of work for feature film versus games? Is there also more technical knowledge and more software you need to know to do feature film type of look development versus games? What are your thoughts and experiences in that?
Yeah, I think it depends. I know that's an annoying answer, but it does depend on the size of the VFX house you're working at. Like,
don't worry, I'll get you to say something very specific sooner or later.
Yeah. Well, just like for example,
I just narrow it down every question.
Right. Just get the exact answer. It's like a politician, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, like at Framestore, for example, I was more of a generalist. I did do mostly lighting on the projects, but like I also needed to like model this car and then model and texture like this road that it's driving on. Like all this stuff back here is practically shot on set. It's like the fountains, the building, all that stuff is practical. But then we had to model in like the CG car and light that and integrate that and stuff. So I guess there is more that you might be expected to do at like a commercial house or like a small TV house because the teams are so fast and it's like you got to know when a model's messed up. And if you can go in and fix it, that's awesome. Like if you're so restricted to just lighting, I think it could hurt sometimes because you're expected to know how to fix certain things. And if like you do need to make a look development change, if the VFX soup's like, hey, the roughness looks whack in this shot. I like the way it looks in every other shot, but this shot, it looks weird. You need to be able to go in there and know how to change that. So I would say there is a little bit more technical knowledge there that you might need to have. For film, you are getting a lot more like quality assets from people, but that also means that there's a lot more stuff that could potentially go wrong. Like for example, with Red Skull, there was times when the cloth was clipping through his cheek, and like, you know, if you do have deadlines, sometimes, you know, like the best idea is to kick it back to cloth and like they fix it. But sometimes it's like, this needs to get to compositing today. We don't have time for that. Can you like just like do an override on the cloth and push it out of the way? So like there is some technical knowledge and just like understanding 3D as a whole that you might need to have as a lighter. With games, again, it depends on what studio you're working at. If you're working somewhere like Naughty Dog, for example, their lighting team is pretty large. I think they have like 10 or 12 lighters or so. Some do cinematic, some do just level lighting. So some of them, a lot of the stuff's been figured out already by more of like the principal guys or senior guys, where the pipeline's fleshed out. You're pretty much just going in and doing what they've said that you need to do for the game. And like, then it's just a matter of you making shots that look nice and stuff like that. If you're the only lighting artist, if you are the guy to do it, a lot of that stuff is on you to set up. So you need to have that technical knowledge. Like on Back for Blood, for years, I was the only lighting artist at Turtle Rock. So like I had to come up with our whole pipeline for like how we're going to render it, how we're going to get it performant, how many lights can we have in a scene that are stationary or dynamic. I also had to work really hard with like the environment team as well to make sure all of our textures were balanced properly, and like albedos weren't getting too dark, and like the roughness looked how it was supposed to look. So there's quite a bit of like look development knowledge I needed to have as well. So yeah, I think both can be technical and both can be more artistic depending on where you're at. So like certain studios, if you're coming in as a lighter, it's like you are the lighting artist. You're just crafting beautiful lighting for the shots. All the technical crap has kind of been figured out. You don't need to worry about that. If you are on a smaller team or on a team where like you're the only lighting artist, there is a ton of technical stuff that you got to figure out. And that goes for film and stuff as well, right? Like most studios have really good pipelines already at this point, and they actually have pipeline TDs that come up with a lot of that stuff. And usually your lighting leads will come up with sequence rigs and like, you know, as far as like what the exposure balance should be for the shots, like a lot of that stuff is figured out and shared amongst the lighters. So if you come in as just like a junior lighter, you're receiving these awesome things that are going to make your shots look great because someone else figured that out for you. So I think if you're starting out, you're going to start learning that knowledge as you grow. So like, don't be intimidated by it, where it's like, oh God, I need to know all this stuff. But there's going to be a turning point in your career where you're expected to be the one setting some of that stuff up and like knowing like these things, like how it affects other departments and stuff.
So we're gonna loop back to the differences as well, and we're gonna go off chart a little bit as well. While you talk, I'm picking up on certain topics, so it's good to address them because of your knowledge and experience and also opinion. So what would you say, because I try and ask this question if possible, to get the general thought on it from each person who feel comfortable answering it, is what would you say are the typical skills and knowledge a junior lighting artist, mid, senior, and elite should have in these three areas, according to your observation, or because you've experienced it from different positions, more or less. So you obviously know, okay, I got all these rigs, and this was in this studio, or this type of movies or games, or so. What would you say is like the minimum to be, how should we say, efficient and,
Sure.
and knowledgeable in this type of roles?
Yeah, I think definitely having a practical knowledge of light is very, very important. So like, I think if you are interested in lighting, picking up photography as like a hobby is like very important, actually. Like you learn a lot about light when you shoot photos, and essentially you're crafting a moving photo when you have a video game, right? Like you're trying to find moments that you can craft. So a lot of times, like I would work with our environment team, and sometimes I was kind of given permission to like, when I go into a scene, if there's things in the set dressing I don't like because it's messing up the composition, or if there's something I want to show off, I kind of had free reign to move things around and like change things. So like understanding composition is incredibly important, and like how you light things affects the composition and vice versa. So like I think having a basic understanding of that is very, very key. color theory is another one, and like just knowing what makes a good image. I know that's like a really broad thing to say, but studying what actual good cinematographers do is something I always suggest. So like look at DPs like Roger Deakins and stuff like that, where you're looking at how they've crafted shots for movies, and try to do that when you're approaching a game, especially if it's something you want to look realistic, right? Like Back 4 Blood has like a stylization about it, but it is like somewhat grounded as well. And then understanding, like, I guess just engines and stuff like that, they fluctuate all the time, but understanding the properties of what's happening with light is something that's always going to carry over, right? Like understanding what global illumination is, bounce light, reflections, like understanding with materials, like how they react to light, like roughness, like all the PBR stuff, like that's just basic knowledge. And then, things like the larger a light source, the softer the shadow, like all these kind of things that are very, very basic are things that you'd be surprised a lot of people don't know until much later. So
that is true. So I know a lot of people do not actually know PBR. So what would you recommend someone to do when it comes to the PBR topic?
Sure. There's a lot of awesome resources. There's this dude, his name's Joey Lenz. He's a tech artist. I think he did lighting now. But this guy's got an awesome website. Yeah, I'm trying to find his website. This is his art station.
He probably has it in our station in the description or something there.
Yeah, let me see if I can do a little creep in here and see if we can find him. So this one? Yeah, so this dude's fantastic. He's got a lot of really good resources for stuff on the tech side, where it goes into like a lot of PBR properties. So I would definitely suggest this dude's site. He goes over like a lot of really, really good stuff in a very thorough way. There's also different, like pretty much every renderer right now uses PBR at this point. So like just playing with engines, right? Like if you're interested in games, download Unreal Engine.
I swear to God, Joey Lance probably has thousands of visits every day, because there's not a single person who doesn't mention the website. So it's like, I think it's probably no one has bothered making a resource similar to it, because it's so good what he's done. There's no point actually until the technology changes drastically. There's no point in it. Could even
for sure. Yep. And there's different graphic. I go to this one a lot too. The Don't Nod PBR chart. I think everybody uses this as well. It's not like perfect, but it's a great resource to get you started. Like there's this chart that Don't Nod did. They went and
we know about it, but a lot of the viewers don't know about it, obviously, because some of them are students and juniors.
Yeah. So Don't Nod is a studio, and they did like a lot of research into like how they can measure things like albedo and roughness, and they like scientifically like went out and tried to capture these things. So they made like a whole chart with like averages of different colors and like what their luminosity is, what their reflectance and roughness is. So it's a pretty cool site just to like get like a general idea, right? So like as far as like the luminosity of clean cement being 180, right? Like that's the same luminosity roughly as like Caucasian skin. So like there's things where, like for me, I like to find something that I can kind of point to as like, that's, I know, at least correct. Like if concrete, let's say, is 180, then what, like how much darker should something be relative to that, right? And like, so you can kind of cheat things a little bit using things as a reference point. If I know that things shouldn't be darker than coal, well, how much brighter should it be than coal, right? Then you can kind of adjust things based on things that, you have like some kind of ground truth to. There's also a lot of scan data now that's coming out, and like how accurate that is or not, I don't know. You can trust the people who captured it. I don't know.
But that's true. But that's kind of why you're saying people should, as a lighting artist, we really do not need to know at least the basic of everything, because we do not. I'm not saying we shouldn't trust our colleagues, but or people we work with. But there are also, in my experience, there are scenarios where things are set up correctly, and if you don't know, well, at the end of the day, you're the one who's gonna get a headache because your lighting's not gonna look good, and everyone's gonna be like, "What's this nonsense?"
Sure.
And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, and like the idea of like things being physically correct all the time and stuff, like that's kind of a newer approach. Like in film, even like we do capture. There's like a strong push on capturing things correctly as best as possible when you're capturing HDRs and capturing set stuff on set. However, when you get back to actually light shots, you are embellishing things, you are changing things anyways. So like you can make everything perfectly exactly how it was in real life, but at the end of the day, you got to make a shot that looks good. And if the light needs to be moved this way because it just looks better, then you're going to do that. If it needs to go up like half a stop because it looks better, you're going to do that. So you're changing what reality actually was anyways. But I think having like a good base to work from is awesome. So that's something that we do in VFX a lot too, is like we'll
do you want to show your lighting kit?
Yeah, I was gonna just show like real quick, just like with capturing lights. So for example, like on this shot here, like it would be my job as like the on-set capture person to go and capture HDRs wherever these people are at. And then from those HDRs, you're getting like fully unclipped lighting information. So you're getting different stops of exposure and combining them later. And that allows you to get like the actual light intensity from things physically. So like having that as your base, what we would do is take these in VFX and pipe those into our lights and use those as the base. And like something that's really cool in things like Arnold and in RenderMan, you can just like push things up and down based on exposure. So it's really, really clean. It's like the exposure of 0 is what the base was. That's what this is captured at. So then like when your VFX supervisor is like, hey, this is kind of dark, can we bring this up 1 stop? You know exactly, I'm bringing this light up 1 stop in exposure. So like the communication between you and people that you're working with gets much cleaner and much clearer because you're just working from something that was there. But if they want to make little tweaks to it, they can, right? Like I'm using this light, but I don't like exactly how warm it is on her hairline. Maybe we cool it off a little bit. So then you're able to take what your base was and adjust it.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know half of the stuff. I'll admit I'm more of a creative, artistic lighter than very specific in technical stuff. It's still I learn it if I have to, but otherwise it's not too much of a problem for me.
Well, that's what I was going to say about this one. So like this kit I made, these come from HDRs I shot, and then like for the lights that I have in here, I actually have HDR textures that I captured piped into the lights. So like I'm kind of trying to steal that workflow for games a little bit. So this is just like a product I created where you can drop in a digital asset and there's different lighting scenarios that you can check your stuff with. So this is something that you'd want to use. I mean, some of it is more like this magenta and cyan one's like not really a practical thing for checking look development, but it's still cool to see how it lights, right? But yeah, you're able to see what your materials and textures are holding up in different lighting conditions. So that's something I would suggest for people too who want to know more about PBR, is like see how things are holding up lit differently. There's so many times where like someone will bring in their asset like looks too green. It's like, does it look green in every lighting condition, or is it just the lighting is really green, dude? Because everything is going to shift together relative to each other. So sometimes people panic when they're texturing something and they see their stuff in a new lighting condition, and then all of a sudden it's like, what? Like, why is her skin blue? I didn't make her skin blue. It's like, well, dude, the light's blue. So it's going to affect the way that looks.
And then there's beginner stuff like color mixing and not understanding how material and the light kind of mixes color as well.
Totally, for sure. Yeah, like right here, you're having 3 different colors mixing together, right? We have a very neutral, probably like a light that's like at a temperature of like 5800 or 5500. And then you have a really, really blue light from the right, and then a really magenta one on the left. And they're all kind of mixing together. So
which is, which works when intended, obviously. We have a question for you from Arthur. Let's do that before we go any forward. His question is: do you have any specific example of challenges when you're the only lighter in the team? Like if you need to explain people the basics and some lighting, or what the lighter do? I think that's a very good question because normally I am the only lighter in every studio I pick. But I want to hear your stories.
Yeah, I mean, you're like the main line of communication with other departments, and I'm sure you guys experience this as well, even working on a lighting team, but like talking with level design and like what their intention is for a level, and like, hey, people are getting lost because they didn't know you're supposed to go this way, right? So like being able to use lights to guide and stuff like that, and like where you want people to go. In the case of Back for Blood, I kind of had to. It was my fault because I suggested this because I wanted to look as good as possible. But we went with baked lighting, so like a lot of the maps were baked. I mean, all the maps were baked, and a lot of them took forever. Like, so just dealing with like render times and stuff. Like, I was like, all right, well, I committed us to this. Like, this is my call. I want the game to look good. I want there to be soft shadows and bounce light. It's a creepy zombie game. Like, I don't want to go fully dynamic because the dynamic lights and the shadows look like shit. Like, what can we do? So I had to kind of eat, what I like the meal I made for myself here, which is going with baked lighting. And like these maps are huge. A to B mission for Left 4 Dead is very, very large usually. And we'd get render times of like, 10, 12 hours, something like that on like medium quality. So like it took a very long time. So we had to get a farm set up, and we got to a point where like, something like this map would take 20, 30 minutes to bake on medium quality. So there was like quite a lot of infrastructure I had to set up with like the rendering engineers and the build engineers. I'm like, how can we make this work, dude? Like, it looks way better when we do this. It's also more performant. Like, what can we do to make this work? So that's definitely a challenge, is like dealing with things like you're the one making the call, and some people might be mad about your call, and it's like, yeah, I know, man, but like it's gonna look better. So you're balancing like quality versus performance.
My longest is 50 minutes, like currently, and then again we're working on this 50 minutes. But I got two computers though, so I go from one to another between breaks.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
50 minutes isn't too bad. It's better than 10 hours.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, it's a huge difference though, because your game, this game was obviously an actual, the players are moving. The game I'm working on, it's a narrative game, so it's fixed cameras, and you kind of click around like a storytelling game. So
that's
it's
cool.
a cinematic decided camera. The characters are not 3D, they're 2D, but they are filmed in real. There's a actual lighting on set. Then there's a specific in-house tech we use to filter, and then there's a specific painter who paints it. Then there's a grader on top who comes after more lighting.
Whoa.
So once I've done the lighting, she goes in and she kind of grades it according to what I've done to the environment. Basically, it's quite a unique experience for me, and that's why we use mixed lighting. Oh, it's in the Unity as well, so it's like mixed lighting, baked lighting. It's a lot of challenges as the only lighting artist, and in Unity, because obviously most of us use Unreal.
Yeah, it's a balance, right? Because you're kind of responsible for the final look most of the time for everything. So it's like you're making calls about tone mapping, making calls about like how dark our shadows should be and stuff. And like obviously you're working with the art director and stuff as well. But you're also having to manage feedback. It's like, well, do I listen to people, like, especially for a game like this, where it's like somewhat horror, but it's mostly arcadey. So it's like you got to have like that horror vibe, but at the end of the day, like you're like 4 players just going with machine guns shooting tons of zombies. So it's like it's kind of a weird mix, right? Where you're having to figure out what's the good balance of going, to appease people for gameplay. Like there's people who are like, oh dude, I can't see anything, it's too dark in here. But then there's other people who are like, oh, it's way too bright, like it's supposed to be scary, like a horror game. So like
never stops, does it?
Yeah, the threshold is hard. And then you have people who hate scary games, so they'll crank their gamma way up, when they play. So then why does the game look so washed out? It's like, dude, will you change your monitor? So it was like,
Yeah. It's really hard to deal with it as well, actually, because even if you say these things, you kind of have to prove it sometimes, like explain how it works, and not everyone has the knowledge for it. I had two follow-up question for this question that Arthur, is it Arthur, asked, is because he was talking about challenges, and how is your challenges with art directors? Is it mostly you do the lighting and they kind of go yes, or do they have strong opinions? Is it different from art director to art director, studio to studio? What's your experience with this kind of workflow?
Sure. Yeah, I've had a couple different types of art directors. Some, like, they're kind of open for me exploring. And it's like, I'll usually create like a mood board or something and have a bunch of references of things that I like and like a direction, like an overall mood or direction I'm trying to take it. And I'll present that. And usually it's like, this looks too whatever. That's great. Like, it depends on what they want. There's a little bit of back and forth there before I even start. And that's worked well. I've had other art directors where like they know exactly what they want each map to look like already. So then they just like lay it on my table and it's like, all right, just go do it. And like, that's cool too, but it's not as fun for me because I'm not able to explore it all or like try something new. But there definitely are different opinions sometimes where I think one look looks really good and they are looking for something totally different. So there's a little bit of back and forth with that. And you have to listen to what they ask for because they're the art director. But there have been times where I've fought for something that I really want or something. One of those things being for Back for Blood, I did not want flashlights. Like it's like this washes out all my lighting. Like I don't want a flashlight front lighting all the shit that I'm doing and crafting in the environment. So that's something that people wanted because they're Left 4 Dead fans, and Left 4 Dead has flashlights, and we still get kind of hate for it now. People are like, where are the flashlights at? But we kind of had a compromise where we made volumes, and when you enter the volume, your flashlight can kick on automatically. So for areas that we purposely wanted like that flashlight experience where your whole periphery is black except your flashlight cone, stuff like that, we crafted and we intentionally did it with design. But yeah,
that's cool.
That's an example though.
Yeah. So as the only lighting artist in some of your examples, so your greatest challenges, would you say they are more like deciding the pipeline and kind of figuring it out with the team, or is it a workload? Like, is it too much work and you have to kind of be more quicker and smaller amount of time to light each area compared to if it was more people? Like, is there anything like that as well? Or?
Yeah, for Back for Blood especially, it was kind of challenging because a lot of how the game feels is dependent on the mood, which is like my responsibility, but also a lot of stuff is being worked on the fly. And sometimes it's blockout geometry. Sometimes it's the level designers making their own geometry. So that being said, a lot of geometry is busted because it's not set up to be lit yet, like with light maps. And like, because I chose a baked lighting setup, the lighting would be broken on a lot of objects. Light map UVs are messed up. So the workload was insane. Like every object in the game, I did the light map UVs for, and like that stuff changes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, we used Unreal's auto unpacking for most of it, but like I had to maintain that. Like if someone deleted a bunch of geometry and re-imported, now like the light map UVs need to be repacked.
I can tell you one thing right now. As we talk, I bet the build machine at work, and when I come to work on Monday, broken lighting somewhere, some broken light maps.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Over happens somewhere.
Yeah, the workload became crazy, and like as most of who like have dealt with baked lighting, if you move any static objects, you need to rebuild the lighting. So like we're trying to change composition and change things, because it makes the gameplay better. Maybe level design didn't like these boxes here because they want you to be able to mantle over this railing. Once you move those boxes, all these boxes are going to have broken shadows and it's going to look like crap until you fix it. So a lot of it was maintenance was the biggest struggle. So it was like staying on top of which maps needed lighting, which ones didn't. And then...
So how did you deal with it? The pipeline for that? I'm curious generally because I am as you said, I'm the only lighting, so I'm actually still have to build the pipeline at the studio because I'm the first one, so I still haven't actually gotten time to do it yet. And I also don't mind all the follows. That's why I like to have our station up during the stream because everyone starts following eventually.
Appreciate it, everybody. That's awesome.
So the pipeline, like, how do you deal with it? Like, what? Because that's like a genuine advice I'm looking for. Like, what have you done to kind of deal with reducing the maintenance issue?
Sure. So when we were in the block out phase, so when level design is literally just placing blocks around the maps and like figuring out what layout feels good and stuff, I would just leave most of my lights dynamic at that point. So like dynamic sun, dynamic skylight, so that everything's filled in so we can at least see. I would do like a visibility pass, quote unquote, just so like if you go through a tunnel and there shouldn't be any light in there, I would just place like loose lights in just for visibility. So we do the visibility pass, and then that would be stuff that I wouldn't really need to maintain too much because level design can change stuff around. Most things are dynamically lit. It's fine. That was one thing. Another thing was just like asking for help towards the end of the project, where it's like, hey, if you're an environment artist or a level designer and you're moving stuff around and you're the last person in that map, please just kick off a lighting build. Like just kick it off on your computer, go get some coffee or whatever, and then come back and just check it in. Yeah. So some people started helping with that, which was great. Towards the end of the project, because I joined Dreamhaven in December, which is the Secret Door team at Dreamhaven, in December before we launched this game. And I worked both jobs. I was actually working at Dreamhaven during the day, then I worked at Turtle Rock Studios at night and just like helped them finish the game. But because I needed to pass the torch off to someone, luckily we found Scott Warren, who's an amazing artist.
All right.
He's a buddy. Yeah. So he kind of came on, I think in February, which was fantastic. So a lot of the levels lighting was kind of figured out, but it wasn't quite taken to the polish stage. But they're like, 90% of the way done or something like that. But Scott came in and he like just elevated the whole game. Like it was awesome. Like having just a second lighter was like game changer because I could focus more time on each map and he could focus his time on the maps he cared about. We kind of divvied up the work and it was awesome. And like later on in the production, we made the choice to do additional lighting scenarios for each map too. So there's like a night mode where like, even though this is nighttime, you can still see like the ambience is good, but the night mode is like, no, dude, it's dark. Like you need a flashlight. So that's like a whole mode where you have a flashlight always on. So we had to relight all the maps for an additional scenario for that. And then we had one for fog as well, where like the fog would lift up and like the fog is incredibly heavy. Visibility is really low. So we had like two.
Yeah, it helps a lot with another lighting artist. Right? You can kind of pull off more ideas and more variation and more stuff, I guess.
Totally. Yeah, and we had to like start enforcing kind of gates as well. Like there's a lot of, oh, well, this would look better if this was here. And it's like, no, dude, like we got to call it done at some point so that we can like actually finish the lighting. Because like everything was a moving part. The whole production till the very end. Like the very end is like, all right, we're locking this map. No one go in here and touch anything. We're building the lighting. We're not messing with it again. Like stop touching stuff.
That's where I'm right now for the this year's maybe release, maybe not. I don't know, guys. But that's where I'm right now. Like stop touching stuff. You guys are breaking it and spending half my day just fixing and rebaking and figuring out what happened. So yeah, that's pretty true. But as much as I would love to talk more, technically I told 1 hour and we are actually on 1 hour 4 because there's so much more to talk about and there's so much more to ask. So perhaps we'll invite Scott back again in the future or not. Who knows? Depends on you guys. If you leave some positive comment and you like to talk and interview, there's a reason to invite him back. If not, I'll still invite him back because I have more questions. But so before we end the stream, just a reminder, you can leave a few more questions if you want to, and I'll make sure he gets them. But a reminder as well for everyone watching, we do portfolio reviews, we do tutorials and community highlights. There's a tutorial for Unreal, there's tutorials for Unity. There's a secret lighting for games course, which you kind of have to talk to me to get access to. Lots of other interviews. I mean, this is the biggest channel probably at this stage when it comes to dedicated lighting and look development across the industry. So keep watching. Snippet shorts when I have time, they still come out. We just finished a lighting competition, lighting challenge with the Decagon as sponsors. We're going to do a new one in, I don't know, a couple of months. There's lighting mentorship. And in case you don't remember, we are doing Karim, I think, next week or the week after. And we're doing Ruth, because we're now expanding over to photography, cinematography. So we're going to start talking to other people in other crafts, even interior designers. You know, I'm hooking up people. We're going to start exploring different topics now to really understand lighting from another perspective. So you guys can keep sticking around and learning in a quite unique way, hopefully. So yeah, and that's some intro for you too, because I don't know if you knew all of this as well. Yeah, so thank you, Scott, says Turkey. Thank you, Turkey, for saying that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I will talk a little bit with Scott in private after I hang up, before I leave him to his daily life. But yeah, let's say thank you, Scott, and let's end the stream. Is there any final words, Scott, that you would like to do? Anything you want to show? Anything you want to promote?
No, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity. And if anybody ever wants to hit me up, you can always reach out to me on ArtStation or Twitter or whatever. And just, yeah, if you have any questions or want advice or want me to expand on anything further since we ran out of time, just hit me up.
Yeah, Jaylee, oh, you were watching. That's nice. You should have said hello earlier. And Hartnett was watching too. Quite a few people were watching. Cool. We'll do another session another time, because again, Scott has a lot of different experiences, and we kind of just briefly picked on the topics today, and maybe we'll go in deeper in another time if we have the opportunity. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll click end podcast and then talk to a little bit with Scott. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good weekend.